Hey guys, so I'm going to show you my favorite lentil meatloaf recipe. This is such a good recipe, it's super easy, you don't need a lot of ingredients, and you don't have to worry about all the water and juices and stuff like that collecting at the bottom because we're not dealing with meat. So we're going to start with half a cup of lentils. I'm using green lentils. You can use whatever type of lentils you want. Green are usually the most common that you find in the store, so they will be the easiest to find. So we're going to do half a cup of green lentils. I'm just going to put it right into the pot. I don't really worry too much about rinsing them off, but if you want to rinse them off, you can. And then we're going to do a cup and a half of water. I have nice filtered water, so I'm going to go ahead and use that. Alright, so I'm going to add that to my lentils. I'm going to put the heat on. Oh, I always do that. I always put it on the wrong burner. There we go. Okay. So we want to bring this to a boil, and then we want to cook it until the lentils have absorbed all the water. So while this is going, we're going to kind of get everything else ready for the meatloaf. So I'm just stirring this up, making sure they're not sticking to the bottom or anything like that. Okay, so while this is cooking, I'm going to preheat the oven to 375. Okay, so that's preheating. The lentils are cooking, so I'm going to get the rest of the recipe ready. So now we're going to saute some red onions and minced garlic. So I'm just going to heat the pan while I cut up the onions. So I do still cook with a little bit of oil. I don't use it often, but I do use cooking spray to spray my pans. If you don't want to use that, that's totally fine. You can use water or something else. You even can use some vinegars and stuff like that. But I just use the spray. It's easier. So now we're going to put a cup of diced onions in, and a piece of information that I always like to share is when you have the opportunity to use red onions over white onions, always pick the red onions or the purple onions, whatever you call them. So the color is antioxidants. So when we have a food that is the same food or food group like onions or potatoes, we always want to choose the one that has more color. You can occasionally use the other ones, but the color is actually antioxidants. So the more colorful a vegetable is, the more antioxidants it has. So red onions have more antioxidants than white, and same with sweet potatoes over white potatoes. So this is starting to boil a little bit, so I'm just going to turn it down a tad, just so it doesn't boil over as I'm doing other things. And we're going to add some garlic to the onions. So it calls for 3 cloves of minced garlic. I use the pre-minced garlic because I'm super lazy, and this has lasted me forever. So I'm lazy and cheap. So half a teaspoon is equal to 1 clove, so I'm going to go ahead and add 1 1/2 teaspoons. Okay, so that's in. Okay, so we're going to let these onions and garlics get tender. So we are going to be using a food processor. If you have a blender that has a big attachment, feel free to use that. That's what I use. So we're going to use our food processor next. Just checking on these lentils. Okay, so there's still water in these lentils, so we're going to let them keep going. So we want to let it go until there's no more water. We want them nice and soft. And you know what? Probably would be helpful if I had a little bit of light. Now I can see. Okay, so while we're waiting for these things to cook, I'm going to go ahead and start putting some of our other ingredients into the food processor. Some of this will also go into the food processor, but while we're waiting, I'll get this ready. So we're going to take rolled oats, cup of rolled oats. Whoop. I always make a mess when I'm cooking. We're going to do a cup of rolled oats. Okay, next we're going to add 3 tablespoons of tomato paste. And I just get one of the small ones. You'll use pretty much all of it for this recipe. We're going to use 3 tablespoons now, but we'll use some more later on. Alright, so this is looking nice and tender and brown. So we're going to go ahead and just turn this off and let it sit while we wait for the lentils. Making a mess, like always. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so the lentils are starting to absorb some of the water, so we're in good shape with that. I'm just going to leave this off to the side because, like I said, we are going to use it later. Next, we are going to add 2 tablespoons of flax meal or ground flax seeds. So a little health tip for you. When you're consuming flax seeds, you won't absorb very much of the nutrients if you eat the entire flax seed. So if you get whole flax seeds, they're just going to pass through you and you're not going to absorb much because they have a really hard outer shell. So if you want to get the good stuff from the flax seeds, get flax meal or ground flax seeds, something where it's broken down and the shell and everything, you can absorb it. So we're going to use flax meal, 2 tablespoons. Next, we're going to do 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast. This is an absolute staple in my house. This is one of the best places if vegans don't want to necessarily take B12 vitamins. This has so much B12 in it. It's fortified with B12. So this gets sprinkled on pretty much anything I eat that I can put it on. So I love nutritional yeast. It also has protein, and it's a good cheese-like flavor if you put it on something like a burrito bowl, which I always do. So we're going to do 2 tablespoons. Ah! See? Told you I make a mess. Luckily, not much of it spilled. Okay. So we're going to do 2 tablespoons of this, and then I'm going to have to clean up my floor. Alright, so next we are going to add 2 teaspoons of maple syrup. Next, we are going to do 1 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar. We're going to do a 1/4 teaspoon of thyme. One of the things that I love about this recipe is most of the things you buy in big packages anyways, so you can make this often without having to go to the store and buying all the ingredients again, because chances are you have most of it already. We're going to do a 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. Those lentils are starting to be close to being ready. And then we're going to do a teaspoon of oregano. Okay, so let's check these lentils. Oh yeah, there's not very much water left in these at all. I do want them to be a little softer, so with the little water that's left in them, I'm going to put the lid on top so that it doesn't all evaporate. So next, we're going to put the onions and garlic into the food processor. I should probably do this down here first in case I want more of a mess on my floor. I'm trying to use my head tonight. Alright, so the food processor is ready for when the lentils are done. Alright, so all the water in here is gone now. Okay. Alright, so we are going to reserve 1/2 cup of these lentils to add in a second. So we're going to go ahead and take out 1/2 cup. Just going to leave it right there. Then I'm going to put the rest of the lentils into the food processor. Alright, we're going to go ahead and blend this. You do want to be careful to not over blend it though. Alright, so this is looking a little dry. It's not really mixing the way I want to, so I'm just going to put a little bit of water in it to help it mix it better. Like, literally that much, not very much. You can always add more. You can't take it out. So that is all set. It is mixed a little bit. I can still see some whole oats and whole onions, but most of it is mixed. Like I said, we don't want to overmix it. So now I'm just going to take out the blade, and we're going to mix in those lentils that we reserved so that we have some whole lentils in here as well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put those lentils that I preserved. And then we're going to go ahead and mix it up. This is looking good and it smells so yummy. Okay. Next, we're going to take a small loaf pan. And we are going to line it with parchment paper. So like I said at the beginning, the really nice thing about making lentil meatloaf is we don't have to deal with all of that liquid that collects at the bottom of the meatloaf. So a lot of times people who cook a lot of meatloafs will buy special pans that kind of hold the meatloaf above so that the water can collect underneath and it doesn't get all soggy. We don't even have to worry about that. This is being a super pain. Okay, it's as good as it's gonna get. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and put the meatloaf into our pan. Here I go making a mess again. Okay. I just used whatever's near me. So now we're just going to press it down into the pan. Try to make it even because you don't want one side to be thicker than the other. You want it to cook evenly. Okay. Alright, so that's pressed down. So next we're going to make the glaze. So I'm just going to get a small bowl. We are going to do 1 tablespoon of balsamic vinegar. So 1 tablespoon of balsamic vinegar. We're going to do 2 tablespoons of our tomato paste. Remember I said keep this out because we will use it again later. So, tablespoons of this, and if you buy the 6-ounce can, you pretty much use the whole thing. And last, we're going to do a tablespoon and a half of our maple syrup. And now we're just going to mix this up and then spread it on the top of the meatloaf. Of course, I'm dealing with all this red and stainable items while I'm wearing white. As you guys have seen with my floor, it's a little dangerous for me. So once this is mixed, so it's nice and smooth, I'm just going to spread it onto the top of the meatloaf. This is probably my favorite part of the meatloaf, is this very easy glaze. I think it really, really makes the meatloaf. Just going to spread it all over. Make sure we get it in the corners. Now we're going to take tin foil and we're going to cover the meatloaf, or lentil loaf, with our tin foil. So now we're just going to bake it for 25 minutes, then we're going to take the tin foil off, bake it for another 8 minutes, and then take it out and let it sit for 15.